August 23, 2008, Leeds Festival, 11:47 p.m. Amy Winehouse was halfway through rehab when something went wrong. The crowd of 40,000 didn't notice at first. Amy had always been unpredictable on stage, swaying, stumbling, sometimes stopping mid-verse. But this was different. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was working the festival medical tent that night. She'd seen dozens of overdoses, dehydration cases, alcohol poisoning. Nothing unusual for a 3-day music festival. She was filling out paperwork when the call came through her radio. Medical emergency, main stage. Artist down, artist down. Amy had collapsed during the second verse. Her band kept playing for a few seconds, thinking she was just being Amy. Then her guitarist, Dale Davis, saw her face. She wasn't breathing. The crowd fell silent as medics rushed the stage. Dr. Mitchell grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the chaos. By the time she reached Amy, 3 minutes had passed. No pulse, no breathing. Her skin was already turning blue. "She's gone," one of the paramedics whispered. Dr. Mitchell refused to accept it. She began CPR while her team prepared the defibrillator. Amy's body was limp, lifeless. Her signature beehive had fallen apart. Black hair spread across the stage floor. "Clear!" The first shock, nothing. "Clear!" The second shock, still nothing. Dr. Mitchell looked at her watch. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Brain death was imminent. In medical terms, Amy Winehouse was dead. "One more," she whispered to herself. The third shock sent Amy's body convulsing. Then, impossibly, a heartbeat. Weak, irregular, but a heartbeat. Amy's eyes opened, but they weren't the same eyes that had closed 4 minutes earlier. The first thing Amy said wasn't, "Where am I?" or "What happened?" It was something that made Dr. Mitchell's blood run cold. "Did I finish the song?" The question itself wasn't strange. What was strange was Amy's voice. It was different, calmer, almost ethereal, like someone else was speaking through her. Dr. Mitchell leaned closer. "Amy, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" Amy turned her head slowly, studying the doctor's face with an intensity that was unsettling. "You have kind eyes," she said quietly. "Your daughter? She's going to be fine. The surgery will go well." Dr. Mitchell froze. Her daughter Emma was scheduled for heart surgery the following month. She hadn't told anyone at work. How could Amy possibly know? "What did you say?" Dr. Mitchell whispered. But Amy was already being lifted onto a stretcher. As they carried her away, she kept talking, but not to the medics. She was having conversations with people who weren't there. "I can't go back yet," she kept saying. "They showed me too much." The ambulance ride to Leeds General Infirmary was unlike anything the paramedics had experienced. Amy wasn't delirious or confused like typical near-death patients. She was lucid, but talking about things that made no sense. "The music never stops," she told paramedic James Crawford. "Even when you think it does, it's still playing somewhere else, in the spaces between the notes." Crawford later told his wife that Amy described the exact layout of his childhood home, a place she'd never been. She mentioned his grandfather's piano, the one he'd learned to play on as a child, the piano that had been sold 20 years before Amy was even born. At the hospital, Dr. Rebecca Hayes was the attending physician. She'd been warned about Amy's condition, but wasn't prepared for what she found during the examination. Amy's brain scans were normal. Her blood work showed high levels of alcohol and cocaine, but nothing that should have caused cardiac arrest. Her heart appeared healthy. By all medical logic, she shouldn't have died, but she had. "Doctor," Amy said quietly as Dr. Hayes reviewed the charts, "you lost a patient last week. The elderly man, room 247. He wants you to know it wasn't your fault." Dr. Hayes dropped her clipboard. Harold Peterson, 73 years old, had died the previous Tuesday during what should have been routine surgery. She'd been blaming herself ever since. "How do you know about that?" Dr. Hayes asked, her voice shaking. Amy's eyes were distant, unfocused. "He's standing right behind you. He says you did everything right. The clot was impossible to detect." Dr. Hayes turned around. The room was empty except for her and Amy. That night, Amy's medical team made a decision that would haunt them for years. They agreed, without speaking about it directly, to keep certain details out of Amy's official medical records. They couldn't document that Amy had described the personal lives of every medical professional who treated her. They couldn't record that she seemed to know things about the hospital that were impossible for her to know. Most importantly, they couldn't officially document what Dr. Mitchell discovered during Amy's brain scan. For exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the time Amy was clinically dead, her brain had shown activity unlike anything medical science had recorded. Not the typical flat line of brain death, but complex, rhythmic patterns that resembled music. Neural pathways firing in perfect harmony, creating wave patterns that looked like sheet music when printed out. Dr. Mitchell kept those scans in her personal files. She never submitted them to the hospital database. Amy was discharged the next morning against medical advice. She insisted she was fine, that she needed to get back to London, but everyone who interacted with her noticed the change. Her manager, Ray Cosbert, picked her up from the hospital. The drive back to London was the longest 3 hours of his life. She kept talking about people I'd never mentioned, he later told friends. Dead relatives, old girlfriends, things I'd never shared with anyone. It was like she could see my entire history. Amy's father, Mitch Winehouse, was waiting at her Camden flat. He'd been frantic with worry, having heard about the collapse on the news. "Dad?" Amy said when she saw him, her voice carrying that same ethereal quality the doctors had noticed. "Mom says she forgives you for the affair, the one from 1995. She says she's known all along but chose to stay because love isn't perfect." Mitch turned pale. His affair with a colleague in 1995 had been his deepest secret, something he'd never confessed to anyone, including his wife. Amy's behavior in the weeks following Leeds became increasingly erratic, but not in the usual ways. She stopped drinking as heavily. She showed up to recording sessions on time, but she also started writing songs with lyrics that seemed to predict future events. She wrote a song called "The Space Between" 3 weeks after the incident. The lyrics described a place where all the music that ever was and ever will be plays simultaneously. She sang about walking through other people's memories and hearing the songs of the dead. The song was never officially recorded, but bootleg versions circulated among her inner circle. Producer Mark Ronson heard it once and refused to ever listen to it again. There was something wrong with that song, he later said in an interview. Not musically. The melody was beautiful, haunting, but listening to it felt like invasion, like she was singing secrets that weren't meant to be shared. Amy's longtime friend and backing singer, Zaylon Thompson, noticed the most dramatic change. "Before Leeds, Amy was intuitive about music," he said. "After Leeds, she was intuitive about everything. She'd know what you were thinking before you said it. She'd start crying during happy moments because she could see the sadness coming." The most disturbing incident happened 6 weeks after the festival. Amy was visiting her grandmother's house in Southgate. Her grandmother, Cynthia, was 84 and suffering from dementia. She rarely recognized family members anymore. But when Amy walked into the room, Cynthia's eyes became completely lucid. She grabbed Amy's hand with surprising strength. "You've been to the other side," Cynthia whispered. "I can see it in your eyes. What did they show you?" Amy started crying. "Too much, Nan. They showed me too much." Cynthia nodded as if she understood. Some people aren't meant to come back with all their memories intact. The burden of knowing what's coming, it's not meant for the living. It was the last coherent conversation Cynthia had before her death 3 months later. Amy's music became increasingly prophetic after Leeds. She wrote about friends getting divorced before they even knew their marriages were in trouble. She composed melodies that sounded like lullabies her future collaborators' children would one day sing. Children who hadn't even been born yet. Blake Fielder Civil, Amy's ex-husband, visited her in December 2008. He was expecting to find her in her usual post-overdose state, fragile, desperate for comfort, willing to reconcile. Instead, he found someone who seemed to see through him completely. "You're going to prison in March," Amy told him before he could even speak. 3 years, 2 months. You'll get clean inside. When you get out, you'll marry someone named Sarah. She'll help you understand what love actually means." Blake laughed. He wasn't facing any charges. He had no plans for prison. He'd never met anyone named Sarah. 14 months later, Blake was sentenced to 27 months in prison for burglary and possession. He met Sarah Aspen, a drug addiction counselor, during his rehabilitation program. They married in 2013. Dr. Mitchell, the festival medic who had saved Amy's life, became obsessed with understanding what had happened that night. She researched near-death experiences, studied cases of people who'd been clinically dead for extended periods. She found scattered reports throughout medical literature of patients who died for 3 to 5 minutes and returned with inexplicable knowledge. Most doctors dismiss these cases as coincidence or false memories created by oxygen-deprived brains, but Dr. Mitchell knew what she'd seen in Amy's brain scans. The patterns weren't random. They were organized, intentional, almost like a recording. She reached out to Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist who'd spent decades studying near-death experiences. She sent him Amy's brain scans without identifying the patient. Dr. van Lommel's response came within 24 hours. "Where did you obtain these scans? This neural activity suggests consciousness persisting during cardiac arrest. If authentic, this could revolutionize our understanding of death and consciousness." Dr. Mitchell never responded. She sealed Amy's medical files in her personal safe, where they remain today. Amy's last public performance was at the Belgrade Jazz Festival on June 18, 2011. Those who attended later described it as the most haunting concert they'd ever witnessed. She performed songs from her upcoming album, tracks no one had heard before. The lyrics seemed to be about saying goodbye, about returning to the music that plays between worlds. During her final song, Amy stopped singing mid-verse and stared at a specific spot in the audience. Several witnesses later said that spot felt cold, despite the summer heat. "I see you," Amy whispered into the microphone. "I know it's time." She died 35 days later. The official cause of death was alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol level was 5 times the legal limit. But those who'd known Amy since Leeds wondered if something else had claimed her. Dr. Hayes, who treated Amy after her stage collapse, read about her death in the newspaper while having morning coffee. Her hands started shaking so badly she couldn't hold the cup. She remembered Amy's last words before leaving the hospital in 2008. "Don't worry, doctor. When my time comes, it won't hurt. I've already been there. I know what's waiting." Dr. Mitchell attended Amy's funeral, standing at the back of the crowd at Edgewarebury Cemetery. As dirt was thrown onto the coffin, she whispered a question she'd carried for 3 years. "What did you see during those 4 minutes, Amy? What did they show you?" The wind picked up suddenly, rustling through the trees with a sound that almost resembled music. Almost resembled a voice saying, "Everything." Today, Amy's medical records from that night at Leeds Festival remain classified. The 3 doctors who treated her signed confidentiality agreements they've never discussed publicly. But sometimes, late at night in their respective homes, they still wonder about the young woman who died for 4 minutes and came back knowing things the living aren't supposed to know. Dr. Mitchell keeps Amy's brain scans in a locked file cabinet in her study. She's never shown them to another soul. But on quiet evenings, she sometimes pulls them out and stares at those musical patterns, those impossible neural symphonies that played while Amy Winehouse was dead. And she wonders, if consciousness can survive death, if knowledge exists beyond the physical brain, what other mysteries are we carrying around in our heads? What songs are playing in the spaces between our heartbeats? What do we really lose when we die? And what exactly had Amy Winehouse seen in those 4 minutes that changed her forever? The answers died with her on July 23, 2011. But the questions remain, haunting everyone who witnessed the night Amy Winehouse died 3 times on stage and came back knowing too much about the world beyond. 10 years after Amy's death, Dr. Mitchell received an unexpected visitor. Emma, her daughter who'd survived heart surgery, the surgery Amy had somehow predicted. "Mom, I need to tell you something about that night, about Amy Winehouse." Emma's hands trembled as she spoke. "I was in surgery when Amy died on that stage. For exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, my heart stopped too. Same time, same duration." Dr. Mitchell felt the room spinning. "I was in this place like a concert hall made of light, and Amy was there. She said, 'Tell your mother the music connects everything. Even death can't stop the song.'" Emma pulled out sheet music, handwritten in Amy's distinctive style. "She gave me this, said I should learn to play it, said it would help me understand." Dr. Mitchell took the sheet music with shaking hands. At the top, in Amy's handwriting, For the doctor who brought me back, the song that plays in the space between heartbeats. That night, Dr. Mitchell played Amy's song for the first time. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, unlike anything she'd ever heard. But more than that, it felt familiar. Like a lullaby from childhood, like a song she'd been waiting her whole life to remember. As the last note faded, Dr. Mitchell finally understood what Amy had been trying to tell her. Death isn't the end of the song. It's just a rest between measures. 3 months later, Dr. Mitchell contacted the families of every medical professional who had treated Amy that night. One by one, she discovered impossible stories. Dr. Hayes' elderly patient had indeed left a message for her, a letter thanking her and assuring her his death wasn't her fault. Paramedic Crawford had inherited his grandfather's piano, the one Amy had described, the one his family had secretly kept in storage for decades. Each story proved Amy had known things she couldn't possibly have known. On the third anniversary of Amy's death, Dr. Mitchell received an unmarked package. Inside was a USB drive containing Amy's final recordings, including one titled 4 Minutes. Amy's voice, ethereal and distant, sang about walking through halls of every song ever written, hearing the music of souls long gone, learning that death is just changing the station. At the end, Amy spoke directly into the microphone. For anyone listening after I'm gone, I died because I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. I couldn't stop hearing all the songs at once. The music of the living and the dead playing simultaneously. I'm not afraid of dying because I've already been dead. I know what's waiting. It's the place where all music comes from. When my time comes for real, I'll go back there. And maybe I'll find a way to send back new songs. Songs that heal instead of hurt. Listen for them. They'll sound like me, but they'll feel like home. The timestamp showed July 20th, 2011, 3 days before Amy's death. She'd known. 15 years later, Dr. Mitchell finally compiled everything. The brain scans, the testimonies, the recordings, the impossible knowledge Amy had demonstrated. She submitted it to medical journals as the Amy Winehouse case study. It was rejected. Too controversial, too extraordinary. But Dr. Mitchell didn't care about publication. She documented the truth. Amy Winehouse had died for 4 minutes on a stage in Leeds and gained access to knowledge beyond the physical world. Somewhere in the space between heartbeats, Amy might still be singing, still teaching, still showing anyone willing to listen that death isn't the opposite of life. It's just another instrument in the orchestra. The song goes on. The music never really stops.